Welcome to our Comprehensive Plan Task Force meeting for the 11th of June, 2024. I'm Al LeGros, and without further ado, let's go through this and make it both useful and efficient. A couple of announcements. First of all, our next meeting is going to be the 25th. We've agreed to meet every 2 weeks on Tuesday at 6 o'clock, so that's the 25th. The other thing I'd like to say is that I'll be out of town for about 10 days, starting the 14th. So if anything dramatic happens, I would ask my vice chair to
Okay. I have to
Get
look
it.
at my calendar.
go into the breach and take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So, but I should be back for the 25th of June. I sent out, in addition to the agenda, Kayla sent out the minutes from the May 28th meeting, and I'd like to, at this time, call for a motion to approve the minutes for the 28th. Okay?
Second?
Okay, approved and seconded, all in favor? Okay, great, we'll post those minutes then. Also, I wanted to just quickly go over the presentation that I made on the 6th of June to the Select Board. I basically took the minutes that we had and summarized those, but a couple of things that I just wanted to reiterate. We talked about a timeline and the fact that the task force is recommending that we wrap this up at the next town meeting, March 25th, March of 2025, I should say. That didn't seem to irritate anybody on the Select Board. I mean, we have the chair here. I think that, how do you feel about that timeline?
I think it was my idea.
Okay. All the better.
I was kind of in favor of it.
There you go.
I wasn't in favor of it, but
Yeah.
I think that was our best bet.
I think the other thing that we sort of touched on was the fact that, you know, we were supposed to deliver this on past March, so we're going to be a year longer than we thought, and we have to be very judicious about if and when and how we use the consultant services that have been available to us. The town has to really take a close look at the amount of money and funding that's available to do that. So I think we need to think about, when do we absolutely need consulting services from this point going forward? And we need to be careful about making recommendations and deciding absolutely what's required above and beyond just our own brain power here. So I'd like you to keep that in mind. Next, I want to talk about an item that has been bantered about for a number of months now, and that's rural character. And I know Amy has brought this up in a number of different meetings and so on and so forth. But when I sent the information out, I wanted folks to kind of come in with some ideas about rural character. What does that mean to us here in Harpswell, and how does it relate to the comprehensive plan? Why is it important, or is it important? I want to just kind of open the conversation up at this point to get people's perspective on what you think rural character is in Harpswell, because I would contend that, say, rural character in Iowa is not quite the same as rural character here in Harpswell. Some things are similar, but it's a sort of a different environment. So when we talk about rural character, preserving rural character, if that's really important to the town, what does that mean to you folks? And I'll throw it out to anybody to open up the discussion.
I will open up the discussion. I think one of the reasons that we so enjoy this community is its rural character. If Harpswell had 60,000 people, I don't think we would feel the same living in, I don't think we'd feel the same way about it. We like coming into town, seeing Merriconig Farm and seeing the shore and the undeveloped fields and woodlands of Harpswell. That's part of what we are. And so I think, I know that you can't protect what you haven't defined. And so if we just kind of enjoy Harpswell, but we haven't really defined what it is that we enjoy about Harpswell, then how are we going to protect it? And part of a comprehensive plan is to protect your community's values. So I would be happy to stand up there and write down what folks think rural character means, but at least if we do this exercise, it will start us off on a common a platform from which to do further work.
I
Go ahead.
kind of agree, Amy, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I also realize what you said, Al. All of us who are here have different visuals of rural character. We have never been a whole town of farms or anything in the past that I know of. But also, I think of rural character is lack of conformity. You'll drive down the road and you'll see the trees, the Merriconig Farm, and you go a little bit further and you'll see a house tucked in. You go a little bit further and you might see a roadside stand. That reminds me of a rural character from where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that, I think is interesting about when you define rural character.
Go ahead, Brian, or George.
The only reason I want to jump in here is because Mary Ann said where she grew up, and to me, that was going to be my input. Rural character of Harpswell is the town that I grew up in.
Right.
I've been here 51 years. I understand that we can't expect things not to change over 50 years, but to me, rural character, to me, my definition would be the town I grew up in, when I was a child and what it was like here. So I would also like to add that we have ordinances in place to protect the properties, to protect the land. And now we're talking about changing those ordinances to create opportunity. Those ordinances were written to protect the land. And it seems like it's all about money now, so. I don't really know where to go
Right.
from there, but that's all I had. Thank you.
I enjoy that too, and, living down 123, see it almost daily. But I also enjoy driving through the three sort of villages we have. And I think those villages are an important part of the town too, and its character. And the other thing, aside from the ocean, which is really great too, the fact that Harpswell has a viable, I think, fishing community industry that I think if that weren't there or was forced to leave, would really change the character of the town.
Yeah. Let me throw something out at this point. I poked around a little bit on the internet and other places, and here's the way rural character was defined in the state of Washington almost 20 years ago. It says, rural character embodies a quality of life based upon traditional rural landscapes, activities, lifestyles, and aesthetic values. So it's not only open space and so on, but it's also the way people live here, the activities that they have. Part of rural character really is the working waterfront. And I also came across an article in Down East Magazine, March 2023, that basically reinforced the point that when you think about Maine character and stuff like that, close your eyes or whatever, it's impossible not to think about Maine without thinking about lobster boats and fishing and the working waterfront and so on. So, to me, if we're going to make rural character an important part of this comprehensive plan in the future, it seems to me that it connects to not only environmental things, but also the way people make a living here and the working waterfront and so on and so forth. And so it really touches base with a lot of things that we've put into this plan. I guess the question I have is, have we reinforced that message enough?
Al, I'm going to interrupt you here.
Yep.
I'm going to ask that you please ask the people here for their input about what rural character
Okay,
is.
well-
I really would love to hear from people, because if folks think that rural character is protected in this plan, then I don't think we've defined it, and I don't think it is protected. You talk about a certain kind of a landscape, or what did you call it? I forget exactly what you said.
Rural landscapes, activities, lifestyles, and
Yeah. So,
that's not my definition, that's a
yeah,
definition that I.
but I think that's a pretty good definition.
Okay,
So landscape means a combination of undeveloped fields or farm fields and woodlands.
yeah.
I have a couple of other things to add to it but I don't want to usurp anyone else.
The only thing I'd like to add is, I agree with everything that's been said so far. And one thing I remember when I grew up here was, I grew up in Cundy's Harbor, and I knew a lot more people in Cundy's Harbor then than I do now, and I still live there now. And that's not a fault of the town or anything like that. I think it's just the fault of the world we live in now. People are moving here and coming like that. But I think that's part of rural character, is kind of knowing your neighbors and stuff, but not being able to see your neighbors, like it's been said before, but that's what's nice about Harpswell. Like, I can't see my neighbors, but I still know who they are, and we're friendly, and we help each other out and stuff like that. I think that's part of rural character.
But Matt, if you lived on Bailey Island, you would see your neighbors.
Yeah.
There's just not that much land there.
No.
We could put a bag over your head.
When I grew up, when I grew up in Bailey Island, there were 3 last names.
One of them was a
Yeah,
Johnson.
yeah, Johnson, Lehman, or Sinnott sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
And, and then I left, Army took me in the early 70s, and I didn't come back till the late 70s, and all of a sudden, it was gone. In 6, 7 years, I didn't recognize anything.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell happened?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I would add a couple of things. I would add dark at night.
Yep.
And I would add wildlife.
Yeah. There's a lot more wildlife than there used to be.
Yeah,
Especially neighborhood I grew up in. If there was a pheasant around, it was gonna be a dinner table the next night.
yeah. Right. And I would add slower pace.
Yeah.
Quiet.
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 Let's talk about the firecrackers.
Really. That was the teenagers.
Yeah.
And I would add, there's a word here that my neighbor recommended, which is decompress, which I really like. I mean, most of us, I think, when we get out of Brunswick and we come into Harpswell, we kind of feel like we're decompressing.
More the winter.
So another one I would add would be either farm or fishing equipment in somebody's yard.
And blue tarps.
Blue tarps, and blue tarps.
Yes, exciting.
Yeah. I just saw the town grader on the side of the road down Harpswell yesterday.
Yeah.
I've seen it for 40 years, but,
Okay, as we're listing these things, I mean, keep in the back of your mind, how is this gonna integrate into the plan? What do we have to?
there you go.
You know, I'm thinking we should actually define it. We're gonna talk about it, and I think we should pull pieces of this and define it of how we are considering it.
If we come away with nothing tonight but a definition of that, we'll have done something.
We will have done something, yeah.
Yeah.
Al?
Yes.
In looking at the '05 plan, I may not be remembering this quite right. I don't think they used or didn't focus on rural character, but they focused on how the town was.
Yeah.
And that they wanted to leave it like that. They wanted that. But they didn't, define the rural character and insert that. And it wasn't emphasized to my memory. But the fact that they wanted it to remain as it was, then that was very much emphasized.
Think it's in the first paragraph?
I'm sorry?
It's in the first paragraph of this executive summary.
Do you really think that's possible?
To do what?
Or
You know-
to have things remain as they were?
What if?
No, in other words, that says no, we're not gonna change. Is that
Could there be,
possible?
well, can there be an ordinance perhaps that controls subdivisions?
Stops climate change.
I'm sorry?
An ordinance to stop climate change, maybe?
No, subdivisions.
No.
Maybe it'd be easier to stop climate change, but.
Didn't they talk a lot about its cultural heritage?
You know, Brian, one of the reasons, I think that rural was in the last plan, and it was there in comparison to growth. So the last plan really emphasized growth in rural areas. And so it wanted to put as much growth as it could into the existing villages, or maybe the creation of one or two new growth centers, and then the rest was rural.
Yeah.
And part of the thing that we like about our villages is the village areas that we have now are pretty much denser development, and then you get outside a certain radius that's probably a quarter of a mile or an eighth of a mile, and then, then you're into forest, or you're into fields, or you're into wooded areas. You don't see a bunch of houses everywhere. So to that extent, the last plan really addressed the issue that I think we're going to have to face, which is the bleed out from the village areas. Because that's what tends to happen, is the traveled roads tend to get developed along their frontage. And then you lose the village feel, because it all becomes one long development. It's like strip malls. And that is a very organic development pattern with the car. The automobile really shifts development patterns into that kind of strip mall kind of development. And it takes decision-making and ordinances to address that.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think one of the problems that we had here in the beginning is we know growth is gonna happen. As much as I wish it wouldn't, I mean, it's just part of life. But I think the problem we've had is in the plan before, we were kind of promoting growth with the mixed-use areas, the affordable housing and stuff like that. And sometimes the best thing to do is to maybe not acknowledge something, kind of leave the whole growth aspect alone. Don't talk about it in the plan, and kind of let it happen the way it's gonna happen. And maybe it works itself out type of thing, but I think by promoting growth, the way we were before in the plan, I think that's where we were getting some of the objections, because it was taking away from that rural character feel, and it was putting something in people's faces that maybe they didn't want to face, so denial's a powerful thing sometimes.
It's true.
Matt, I'm wondering too, if we can't, picking up on what you said, that doesn't stop us to still address the housing issue in its own way and other issues, long as we're not trying to put a box around where we want it to happen, maybe.
Right. I think that's the biggest thing, kind of, and I think we've kind of always done it as a town. I mean, it's,
It's how we've developed.
yeah, it's just kind of let it develop as it comes, for lack of,
And it's done it,
yeah.
but
And
you
it,
don't like it.
no, I don't not like it, I didn't say that. I just wish there was no growth, you know what I mean? I
Well,
wish
and-
everything stayed the same, but I also acknowledge that that's not feasible.
Yeah, in the state, when the state looks at a comprehensive plan, they want communities to designate as closely as possible growth areas, for the reason that growth is basically normally expected in most areas. That's something that's, and oftentimes desired in most areas. Where do you want to grow your community? How do you want to make it better, et cetera?
Brunswick.
But I think the state needs to understand too, that, I mean, we're a community of islands, and there's only so much land, water, and resources on an island, so at some
Right.
point, you just can't grow anymore. And this goes to the climate change thing too. One of the biggest things fueling climate change, unfortunately, as much as we don't want to admit it, is more people. The more people, the more resources there are. So, I mean, we can combat climate change by remaining stagnant.
But the
We
other
have,
thing
we
that-
have 25 square miles of land. 25 square miles
In Harpswell.
in Harpswell,
That's how many it is?
yeah? And that was some numbers I just read.
Wow.
And 216 miles of shoreline.
Yeah, I know,
And
that's what,
very little,
yeah.
There's no inside there.
No, I
not
was
much inside.
You know,
surprised
What
that
we're
was
trying
small.
to do.
I have lived in Maine for 40 years, and when I first moved here, I lived up in Gardner. And I used to drive to work from, I actually lived in Richmond. I would drive from Richmond, I'd go through Farmingdale, Chelsea, I would go through Hallowell, and then finally make it to Augusta. And each one of those towns, 40 years ago, was its own separate town. And the road, I knew this was gonna happen, and I actually talked to some of the, the governing bodies of each town and suggested to them that they define their growth in rural areas. Otherwise, the road from Richmond to Augusta was just going to become one long strip. And over 40 years, that's exactly what's happened. So you can't tell when you leave Gardner and you get to Farmingdale, you can't really tell that you've just left one town, because it all blends into another.
But could that be, could that have been avoided by ordinances?
It could have been if they had, I mean, and Al's right, part of the reason that you want to define growth areas is because you want to grow, you recognize you're going to grow, but you want to grow in certain areas. And then you keep those rural areas rural. That's one of the things that really helps to keep a town have its identity, is to have its center and then control growth out from it, so that there's a separate green space between, or much lower density between the growth center and then the next growth center. Otherwise, you don't have a center, you just have strip.
And shouldn't we be talking about increasing lot size, not decreasing lot size?
I wasn't gonna bring that one up, but you,
Somebody had to be the guy.
I still go back to the fact, though, is we don't have a town like Brunswick where you can take and make a growth center. We have these,
No.
we have these little pockets.
we don't, we don't.
Let me just throw in a quote from, that was in something I read in Down East, 2023. Cities across Maine use zoning and building codes that favor a, quote, suburban model. That is, single-family houses on large lots. When I look at our ordinances, that's essentially what we have settled on here as a way to
Control.
control growth, mitigate, a lot of density and so on. subdivisions, 80,000 square feet, almost 2 acres. Single lot, 40,000 square feet. And, as we're gonna find out, well, I'm not sure if that's gonna be discussed as part of the ordinance changes that are being articulated, but Amy's on top of that. Are you chair now, or still vice chair? Have they voted on a chair?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyway, so I want everybody to keep in mind that what we have in place right now, it essentially favors single-family houses on fairly large lots. And that may be good, that may be where we want to be in Harpswell, I don't know. Others don't have quite that same opinion, but I think, we have to recognize there are a couple of things that make Harpswell unique. One is water. I mean, when I looked at all of the stuff that I read, there was no discussion about limitations regarding water, septic. These all kind of assume that you could kind of lay out a growth area and, you know, you're gonna have public utilities and so on and so forth. And the other thing is, as was pointed out, the geography of this town is such that we don't have a whole lot of developable land in the interior zone, really. When you start taking a look at the conservation areas that were lined out, and then people who own chunks of land, there's not a lot left, really. And so, that's a reality that kind of butts up against, you know, a lot of building in the town. On the other hand, there are a bunch of folks in the town, as we all know, that feel like we need to do something to address this kind of spiraling real estate situation that we're in, where housing prices are gonna go up and up and up because there's no land to develop, and there's no latitude to really build smaller houses on smaller lots. So, you know, it's a tough situation. There's no easy answer here, but,
So Al, I wanted to jump in with one thing, which is, one of the things I find most appealing about Harpswell is its sense of community, the people in it. I mean, there are sub-communities, but they all come together, I think, in large part as one community. And that's, you know, people who've lived here for a long time, I've learned a boatload from, and a bunch of retired people like myself and my wife, and other people. But everybody is open to everybody else, and you can walk around town and, check in with people and whatnot, walk along Mitchell Field, and people are friendly, all that. So I think that sense of community is very palpable, and I've certainly lived in other places where it doesn't exist. So I think that's an important part of Harpswell's identity. And I think what I would say about that is that I'm saying something that's very people-oriented. The people who live here are nice, and even the way the town governs itself with committees and task forces and coming together like this is something that I think is maybe not entirely rural in character, but the way it works here, it emphasizes it. So
Yeah,
I would
good
say
point.
people.
yeah, I tried to go through all of the committees in the town and tally up the numbers of people that were involved, but it's well over 100
Oh, yeah.
of people in the community, and some of those folks obviously are on several communities, like Mary Ann and others.
On every committee.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a huge investment in terms of not only numbers, but also quality of people and so on, in doing things that kind of build that community spirit. And I think that's part of rural character, because if you go to downtown Manhattan or something like that, you're not gonna find that, right?
You don't even have to go to Manhattan. You just need to go maybe 500, maybe
Yeah.
300 miles south.
Yeah. So that's an important part of it. Any other inputs about rural character? We've got undeveloped fields, woodlands, in Mary Ann's vernacular, lack of conformity, that is diversity. it's the town I grew up in, our villages, unique activities, working waterfront, and so on. Fishing, dark at night, wildlife, slower pace, quiet, decompressing. Rural equipment, unique geography, including islands, I added the islands, and sense of community, volunteerism. Anything else that we want to?
Wildlife thing, when, the first couple of years I lived here, I remember looking out my window and watching a fox walk by with a duck in its mouth.
Yeah.
And another time I looked out the window and there was a tom turkey with, I think, 15 females doing his dance with his tail spread.
Right.
I mean, it was a.
Lucky guy, right?
I was very impressed. I haven't seen that happen in the last 10 years.
No,
Come to my house tomorrow
come
morning.
down on our end.
It may have something to do with the fact that on 3 sides of us, new houses have gone up.
Yeah,
Now, one house has chickens, and I know the fox has taken some of those chickens, but I don't think the ducks are coming around anymore. And I don't think we've come up with anything yet that's gonna stop this.
Yeah.
People are gonna continue to buy and build.
Yeah.
We may be able to shape it a little bit. So the idea, for instance, of encouraging people to have clusters of housing rather than one house every 2 acres might reduce the likelihood that there's no wooded area around. But I think we need to be pretty creative if we're gonna maintain that kind of rural character.
Yeah, I mean, the wildlife issue is, it's just a fact that wildlife requires ecosystems in order to thrive and survive. And when you chop the ecosystem up into, it doesn't matter whether you chop it up into clusters or you chop it up into, 2-acre lots. It does matter a little bit, especially if you can connect those
If you leave
open
corridors,
fields.
it
But
helps.
you need to make sure that you connect them. But it does require not having people, because it requires an ecosystem that doesn't contain human beings. And so, to me, that's part of what Harpswell is.
and Amy, talk about that. We have subdivisions where you need 2-acre lots. You have a street down the middle, and you've got all these 2-acre lots. We also have a flexible lot subdivision ordinance in town that isn't taken advantage of nearly enough, that takes the houses and puts them over here and takes the rest as open space. So you're at least keeping large areas that'll take larger animals, basically.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have never promoted as much as we probably should.
Because everyone wants single-family houses, because the market wants single-family, because everyone wants to be able to know their neighbor but not see their neighbor. And that's been the market force. I think we need to address that, though. That's a really good point. The other thing that's not in here is no heavy traffic. That's another thing about rural character, is you're not, you don't have a slew of streetlights before you get, to where you need to be. And it doesn't take you 20 minutes at 30 miles an hour when the speed limit is 45. Because there's just,
Is that idea like all 12 months, or like?
yeah, well, I know, you're
little
so right,
different.
Peter, because getting out of my driveway in the summertime proves much more difficult.
Well, it's been that way my entire life.
I know, yeah.
That has never changed.
Well, so, okay, Al asked the question, how are we going to make this work? One of the ways we could make it work, and this is something I like about the draft, is it doesn't really, if you're going to do a subdivision, it doesn't give you the option of, it says you have to cluster.
Yeah, you could do that.
And that's a tricky one for this town, because part of the reason that the last plan failed was it saw all of this, and it wanted to really encourage people to cluster by giving them added density. And that was the carrot for getting people to, because, okay, you'll get more units if you cluster. I'm kind of like, I don't really, you just are going to cluster. If you're going to do a subdivision, you're going to cluster. And by the way, you're going to connect to the one right next to you, and you're going to make your open space contiguous.
Right.
And you're not going to build within 30 feet of a stream. You're just not. Because if you do, that's going to pollute the stream. And guess where the stream's going to go? Because all water goes right to the shore. What this plan is missing is the rural protection and stimulating, not stimulating, but rural protection and also, and I think traffic control, but also environmental protection. There's no environmental protection in this plan.
Okay. Other comments? Okay, so if I were to give this page to somebody, some bright, erudite person in this room, could you come up with a definition of rural character for Harpswell?
No. I'm going to write, and let's have people take that, let's paste it up and have people just call out phrases or sentences, and I'll write it down.
Okay.
We can do groupthink.
All right. I thought that's what we were doing.
Committee,
Yeah, I thought we just
committee
did that.
thing,
Yeah.
committee thing.
You just have to shorten it.
Come on, you're all college graduates, or you're fishing folks, and you're not. got
But you
great
took the
notes.
word,
By the way.
Yeah, me too.
I probably should.
That's no excuse.
Well, technically, Uncle Sam pulled the plug. He said,
So what's rural character?
can we use some of those?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, can we hang that back up behind you, the list?
Then we can.
what we have right now, we have undeveloped
We need
fields,
Al to reach. He's the-
undeveloped fields, woodlands, little traffic, lack of conformity, diversity.
I'm working on it.
Turkeys.
The town I grew up in, our villages, unique activities such as the working waterfront, fishing.
Can you hang it up?
Can you hang
Like
it up
on
so
the
we
clip?
can use it? I think those are clips, aren't they?
Is that what these are for?
I think so.
Yeah, they are. They should slide under that.
Oh, does it? Look at that.
Heavier paper, but
Probably the first time they've been utilized.
probably.
All right.
Never noticed them. That's probably why you never use it.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Oh,
They never use them.
we tried.
Just stand there, Al.
Let's see.
Can you use one of these? Is one of these work?
Let's try another one.
Maybe we could clip this to one of the clips.
See what you did.
I didn't.
How many intelligence officers does it take to hang up this paper?
Right.
Okay, there you go.
We're gonna leave it there for the rest of the time.
Okay.
Amy,
Okay, just,
Amy, could you say, what's the goal of this exercise right now? And it could be any number of things, and I think it's useful, this is not a negative comment, but it'd be helpful if we focus. Are we trying to come up with a sort of an introductory paragraph definition, sort of like that one you read about the state of Oregon or something? Are we looking for sort of a pithy statement of what rural character is that we want to preserve?
Rural character.
Is it a general consciousness raising, which is also helpful, I mean, but what are we working towards right now?
I think we want a
Your
definition,
mind.
rural character of Harpswell.
Well, I'm
What's-
asking Amy, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we should come up with a definition, I agree with Al, actually, that definition of rural character for Harpswell. And it can be a paragraph, it can be a bullet statements,
Okay, that's good, that's fine.
okay?
Yeah, that's
The
helpful.
definition of rural character for our town, right? This is our town.
Long stretches of woods and fields separating our small villages.
The flip side to this sometimes is the absence of different parts of civilization, like your point of strip malls. Well, we don't have strip malls, and we probably want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
So the ordinance could help out in that way.
Okay, could we say long stretches of woods and fields separating our villages that are connected by rural roads or low-traffic roads? Or would that work?
Rural roads, I think, is better.
Rural roads, okay.
Yeah, no traffic lights.
We can't,
Connected
Someone,
by
That's a flasher though, right?
rural roads,
and Amy.
no
knows that.
traffic lights.
Bowden College wanted to put one in the Baby Road.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. Told them no.
Yeah, right.
Okay. That's a good start.
Could you get out of your driveway better if there was a traffic light?
No, because you know what would happen? I thought this through.
I was thinking of you today as I tried to get out of your road.
It would pile up, 10 cars.
That's true.
I'd never get out. I took a video of the corner market on the first couple days it opened, and it was just like people trying to turn in, people trying to turn out, people trying to turn up Mountain Road onto 123. It was an interesting,
You need a rotary.
yeah, a rotary, there you go.
No rotaries.
Okay, so how
Maybe it's
about,
nice.
how about, rural neighborhoods, quiet rural neighborhoods, where people, live and work, and,
Amongst wildlife.
Oh, I
Pardon
like
me?
living and
Amongst
working in the same
wildlife.
town.
What's that?
quiet,
Living and working in the same town, I like that.
quiet, rural neighborhoods where people live, who know each other, and have,
Be careful about the work part of it, because at 4:45 or 5 o'clock in the morning, when the lobster boats start churning out.
But I think that should be included, only
Yes,
because,
but
and who know each other
it's a welcoming sound.
yeah,
Okay.
in a setting
you're talking about.
I have a muffler.
that
Do lobster boats purr or do they roar?
Now they roar.
They're better than a jet ski.
natural ecosystems of forest,
What's that word, Amy?
I'm sorry, open space and working waterfront.
Ecosystem.
And a strong sense of community
Okay.
in there somewhere?
Quiet rural neighborhoods where people live and work, who know each other, in a setting that supports natural ecosystems of farm, forest, open space, and working waterfront. I
Yeah.
can't read my own handwriting. That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. That's probably
I
enough.
think
It's pretty good, though.
this is getting into the sociology of rural rather than the more geographical, physical things, but it seems to me a strong tradition of volunteerism, which which is what rural communities to me mean, and we have that. And by the way, the things that are protecting the values we want are more often than not legislated. They have to do with volunteerism.
Well, you know, what changed in this town
Ha is a good example of
is
that. it seems to me.
volunteerism. When I grew up, it was the natives.
Yeah.
Now, you go to a fire department now, you won't find a fisherman.
I know.
Until you two showed up, it was hard to find a fisherman on any committee, you know? And I've been screaming for the last 10 years since I've been on this, you know, for you guys to come forward.
It helped when you guys moved it to later in the day.
So is there another, because you can have volunteers in cities as well. Is there another word that might, I'm just asking, like neighbor helping neighbor, or, I mean, I'm just asking.
Well, Harpswell's different, because
Yeah.
all of our committees, with the exception of these two, they all look, you know, both committees look like us. You know, but mostly retired, 'cause, you know, we have the time to do it.
Yeah.
And the way the world is nowadays, the fishermen don't really have the time. Fortunately, they only have 800 traps. My family fished 2,000.
You're right, there's so much other stuff we have to do now that we never had to do, there's so many
Yeah,
other
yeah.
meetings.
Yeah, I'm not picking on you. I'm just
No,
saying.
no, you're right, I'm not saying you are. No.
And I submit that that is part of a rural community, because we are here as retirees doing some of these things as volunteers.
Yeah.
That also,
Yeah,
Yeah,
figuring when
yeah.
their kids get older, they'll do it too, and that's,
But-
I heard something they were talking about Maine in general, and all of these features are things that they brought up, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what is so great? The reason people want to volunteer is because they can see the fruits of their labor here. They're not volunteering in some amorphous place. They see and meet and connect.
you can actually make a difference.
Yeah.
Making a difference, I like that.
So there's another way of describing this, or bringing this up, I think, that is not just like the formal volunteerism of committees, which I think is great. But we live downstream of Oak Ledge Road, and in every windstorm, trees go down frequently on the power lines, all the time across the road, so the road will be closed for, a long period of time. And there are legitimate, like, chainsaw parties where
Yeah.
people who don't have chainsaws pull stuff away, or, whatever, and so everybody has like a good time, and this was great, yeah, like, we cleared the road.
Welcome to Doty Point.
Yeah, it's sort of that get it done
Yeah.
It's
done thing,
it's a hazard.
which I've lived in a lot of places, and it's sort of like, you call the fire department, or you
Yeah.
call the utility department,
But-
and you wait.
It goes back because when I was growing up, the power hardly ever went out. And you know why? There weren't any trees.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody cut the damn trees down anymore.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. And,
Yeah.
and Harpswell's a tough place to grow a tree because there's no topsoil.
No topsoil.
Everything's a big old dusty rock, and it's mostly softwoods, spruce trees, and down they come.
First wind comes, blows them down anyway.
Yeah.
That was a problem on Wallace Shore Road. We had a big tree came down. It got dangerous. Every guy in his chainsaw was out there roaring these things up. I says, there's too many chainsaws.
Okay, we don't get off track on chainsaws. One of the things also, Al, to answer your question, I think when we get this done, we can measure the future land use plan about whether it meets these requirements. This should be the standard against which we develop our future land use plan.
So in that case, before we write another couple words, I want to, some houses that, like, even on the road I live on, there was a small house that was rented for a few years when we first moved here. And the owner sold it, and someone from Massachusetts purchased it and, has torn it down, is rebuilding it, and I'm sure they're not gonna move here yet, they're young. So it's probably gonna be a seasonal property, or seasonal and/or short-term rental. So I do think that one of the things that happens is that, whatever growth is, does it mean more population, does it mean more buildings? It could mean more buildings with less full-time year-round population. It could mean more buildings with potentially fewer people who have that sense of community because they're up here for 3 months or something. So I think that there's this idea of, like, do we need a certain amount of growth to just stay level with the population that lives here
Yeah.
year-round?
Just I'll make a quick comment here. When you look at the numbers, Harpswell's population in the last few years has actually, full-time population has actually decreased. And they are actually projecting over the next 5 or 10 years that the population, full-time, year-round population of Harpswell will decrease by 3.5%. So right now,
Who's predicting that?
the state of Maine, based on the numbers that they have. So, and I think a lot of this has to do with spiraling cost of living here, but there may be other factors as well. So we're right around 5,000 people right now. In 2005, they were projecting that by this time, we'd have like 5,500, 5,600 people. Hasn't happened. And it, like I said, it's actually going down. So
Do we know what the seasonal population, is that gone down, up, stayed?
No, last time I knew, it was around 48% non-resident taxpayers in Harpswell. It was getting close to 50-50.
yeah.
Wow.
I suggest you lost your families, and they've been replaced by 2 people. Because you look at the schools, how they've lost population over.
Yeah. Yeah,
The median age is now 61 plus.
Though it
So
is-
that's, half of the population is over 61.
okay. So there's nothing that we can do about this with the comp plan. Part of that is just the demographics of aging in the US and the fact that people are having fewer kids in the US. And the planning board, we looked at I forget the name of the guy on Abner Point Road, who's a young guy, rebuilding a house, got a wharf, and he's gonna fish. And,
Oh, Tyler.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we looked at another house yesterday.
I thought this was the one you were
You know,
talking about.
You know,
Yeah.
you can tell this story is a huge friggin' house, probably maybe 40 years old. They want to tear the whole thing down and rebuild from the foundation up. You know, part of the things that I think we ought to be paying attention to in the comp plan is, where does all this solid waste go? Are all of us paying for somebody to tear their house down
I
and
don't think so.
put, where does it go?
North Walk.
Nowhere to walk.
Storage walk.
It does.
Most of the contractors are, I believe, building that into the price of the house, is getting rid of the,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, well, anyway, another house is yesterday was a little tiny shack that was basically washed away, but they're gonna rebuild it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 sisters and, another guy is gonna expand his house on the waterfront. He's gonna move it from Brunswick here. Why do you think he's moving from Brunswick here?
Taxes.
Texas, exactly.
No, I don't think so. Although
I
you're
do.
probably right. You're probably right. Yeah.
My daughter's house would fit in my
Good reason.
garage
Yeah.
and pays more taxes than I do.
Well, that's the other
Yeah.
thing, is that development increases your taxes, because you have to pay for services. That is almost true across the board. It's not always true, but it's almost always true. The denser development you have, the higher taxes you have.
But we're not gonna see that in Harpswell, though.
Yeah,
Because
particularly if you
we're
have
not gonna
sewage
provide the
systems and water
services.
systems
That's
that you're
right.
paying for,
Let
but
us-
we don't have that.
We-
No. and-
But
So
if
We
we,
don't have the land for any great expansion.
no, but, so,
And the people who do move here are mostly retired.
yeah.
You know?
But what we do see is as people spread out, the town is asked to pave this road, the town's asked to repave that road. So what used to be just a single paving job that went down one road, now it's going out
Oh.
and spiraling out. And who's?
We don't have any roads for paving.
You don't have that
Don't.
many. 68% of the roads are private in Harpswell.
And I hope it stays that way.
Well, that town hasn't taken
They
it.
can add mine if they like. but-
Well, what happened to Peabody Road? What
That's
was
a
the
town
story
road.
with
That's a
Peabody
town
Road?
We're gonna pave it.
Yeah,
It was paved. It's hard to tell, but,
yeah.
and
And
it's a
who is
hazard.
demanding that that road be paved?
Well,
The owners of the new subdivision?
no, actually, it's been on the list for about 5 years. Mr. Ponziani put it on there. We were gonna do that first, and then we did Basin Point first.
Okay,
So,
all right.
no, it needs to be done before we get sued. Somebody wrecks their car, the road's a mess. You know, and there were some people on the road that didn't want it done, but, you know, we've kind of alleviated some of their concerns. And it's-
Okay, anything about decompressing or,
I
So,
suggest if you, I'm sorry,
So, Amy, I wanted to go back to your comment, so I think you said we can't do anything about, the fact that housing prices are going up, which
No,
is true.
Yeah, well, actually, what I meant, Peter, was that the demographics, that the population is aging and people aren't having more kids.
So, but is there like, I think what we tried to do with the previous plan, maybe I didn't understand it, was find a way that maybe a few houses could possibly be built that would be affordable by a median income resident of this area. And is that not possible to do?
I think so. In fact, Al,
think it
I
is, or-
suggested it through Al to the Affordable Housing Group, was to start a fundraising and start building houses.
But there's nothing we could do in the comprehensive plan that would make that easier or make an
No.
amenable path to it.
Well, the only
Talks
thing you
about it.
might be able to do is recommend changes in the ordinance to
Yeah.
allow
To allow it.
something like that to happen. I mean, you have the possibility of converting, single-family houses into, say, two houses, two
Yeah.
living spaces, as long as the number of, bedrooms do not exceed what is currently there. If you have a four-bedroom house, you can split it into two bedrooms, or one bedroom and one two-bedroom. You have the possibility of, building, ADUs, auxiliary development, what's the ADU? Develop-
Accessory
You're
dwelling
accessory
units.
Accessory dwelling units.
A dwelling unit.
And changing the ordinances that exist now, which kind of restrict what you can and cannot do, to allow an ADU to be built on the same piece of property that you have a single-family house on. So those are two ways that you can possibly get smaller structures, if you will, and get people in that way. And then of course, there's the possibility of doing something in subdivisions where you have duplexes and things like that. But that requires, I think, some creativity. I mean, when the planning board goes out and looks at a subdivision, you tick off a certain number of requirements, but one of the requirements is not, is this subdivision, can more be done with this subdivision in a creative way to make things, to have a mix of different types of houses. It's almost like, okay, like Quahog Farms, you got big houses on 2-acre lots.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. and
Some
you-
subdivision.
You blank it off. The same thing happened in the subdivision that you're in, that you're near. That's kind of the way things evolved, or have evolved. So, yeah, there are things that can be done.
So my only point is that, for me, a vibrant community would include at least some diversity across age groups, right? And it strikes me that, and I would interpret some of Amy's remarks as saying that's, under threat, right? So is having, young families part of rural character? I don't know.
Yeah, of course
Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely.
Of course it is.
So
So
then,
we should say
we
it.
should try to make some kind of accommodation for that.
Okay, so, quiet rural neighborhoods where a diverse group,
People of all ages.
where people of all ages, people of all
That would be
ages.
point.
Yeah.
We have young
Live and
families up
work.
there,
Yeah.
two sets of grandparents raising kids.
Okay, we think we have enough between those two pieces of paper to come up with a definition?
Isn't that the definition?
And what I'd like to do is to have a couple of people here go out and brainstorm this and come up with a definition.
I'll put this together, I'll
Okay.
send it around.
Okay.
And then you get back to me with your comments, and then the next meeting, we'll finalize it.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank
All
you
right.
for doing this with me. I have been chomping at the bit, and I appreciate,
And noticed.
I'm not a wallflower, and I'm not gonna apologize for that.
Just keep going.
All right. That's good. All right. I'm going to give Amy a chance to catch her breath a little bit, and I'm going to go a little bit off script in terms of the agenda while she gets her things together there. I want people to continue to think about the future land use plan and the potential changes that are probably going to be required for this to go through the town. We talked a little bit about it informally, about the concerns that were expressed when you specifically identified areas on the map to do mixed-use development or cluster homes and so on and so forth. That's just one example of the kind of thinking that I think we have to go through. How can we make that more acceptable? Let's put it that way, to the town. And we'll have that discussion at a later date. I wanted to also let you know that I'm putting together, one of the things that came across in the last 4 meetings that we had with the public was that this is a big slug of paper. Was not well communicated, if you will, to the town. So I've had one discussion with the Harpswell anchor, J.W. Oliver, and what I am working on is a series of articles that will come out each month over the next several months that takes the comprehensive plan and addresses 2 or 3 areas of the plan. And I've drafted, and I'll try to get it out to you folks tomorrow, a plan or an article that talks about the demographics of the town, because I think it's important for everybody to understand where we really are in the town in terms of who's moving in, what's the town look like in terms of age and population and so on and so forth. Starting with demographics and then talk about the working waterfront. And when I send this around, I'd like you guys in particular to take a look at it and make sure that we're hitting all the marks in the working waterfront. I'm also going to address, let's see, natural resources, groundwater, water quality. And so those are the areas that I'm going to address initially. And I hope to get this put together so that we can get it in the July Harpswell anchor. And essentially what I'm going to go through here is and pick out the highlights of those areas and say, here are the main goals, policies, and strategies that we're recommending for these particular areas.
Excuse
And
me,
then
Al, are you going to do all those in one article, or are those different?
all the ones that I mentioned in one article.
That's a lot.
I know. That's why I'm have to go back to my Navy concise writing style, whatever. But I think if we want to capture the entire plan between now and, let's say, the October, November timeframe, we need to address several of these areas each month. These areas that I'm starting with are relatively straightforward. I want to end with future land use plan, housing.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that created the most controversy and so on. So it's going to give us several months to think about that, and by that time, hopefully, we'll be able to put together something that we all agree on in terms of where we think we need to go in those particular areas. So, but, for example, the second article might talk about transportation, might talk about recreation, might talk about fiscal capacity of the town, which is an important thing, because if we're looking at planning for the future, you know, someone told me if, what was the phrase? Future planning without funding is hallucination,
Yes.
something like that.
That's right.
So in other words, the town is in really good fiscal shape right now, but there are lots of big-ticket items that folks, like the guy sitting next to me, are gonna have to be grappling with in the next, not too distant future. A potential fire station here, or central emergency building here in the Mountain Road area. The issue of Mitchell Field and what we really need to do there in terms of the exploding costs that are involved with Mitchell Field dock and wharf system. And there may be other things like roads, that we may have to address in terms of storm surge and things like that. I mean, there are some major issues that, and so the better fiscal shape that the town is in, the more we're able to cope with those things. So there are several things that I think I can address fairly quickly over this, let's say, in the August timeframe or September timeframe, and then end in October, November with future land use and so on. And so over the next 3 or 4 months, we hope we have a series of articles that kind of breaks this down into digestible pieces for people to focus on. Okay. Yes, sir.
One of the questions for the town is, one question, a set of questions is, what do we do internally? But another one is, what kind of external pressure are we gonna be under? And I think there are, in the last 10 years, there's been a huge increase, I think, in retired people moving here. And a decrease in the number of families and kids, to the point where the school's viability is being threatened. I think what's going on in the rest of the world is gonna increase some of those pressures. I think the number of people who are trying to get into the US is up by millions. It's gonna get worse as climate change gets worse and worse in places like Africa and Asia, et cetera. It's gonna get worse for us as more people in Texas saying, I don't wanna put up with this 100 degrees temperature all the time. I'm gonna move to somewhere it's cool in this country, and a whole lot of people recognize Maine as being cool. So I just think that one of the things that we probably need to do is take a look at what we think is gonna happen in the next 10 or 15 years in the rest of the world that is likely to have an impact on the demand here. Because I think we don't have the option of making the market work in our favor. The market's gonna work the way the market works, and the price of real estate is gonna rise. But
Okay.
if we do some forecasting about what we see as being major forces, we might be able to be creative about how to deal with them.
Okay, I will try to work that in. I have a draft. I'll work on it and get it out to you folks tomorrow. The anchor to publish this thing is gonna wanna see something by the 15th of June or something, right around there. So, I would ask you to take a look at this, think about it, provide some recommendations and inputs so that we can get it out next week sometime to the anchor. And I always give Christie a copy of whatever I try to send to the anchor. I'm gonna be out of town starting on Friday, so, this is kind of a compressed timeline, but I'll do the best I can to get this out to everybody and incorporate those things.
Al?
Oh,
I just wanted to mention it, I'll mention it really to the whole committee, you and I and Kevin. We have been talking about, on the Conservation Commission, and Kevin has talked about having the hydrologist come down.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're going to write about water, it would be nice if we could coordinate, because we're trying to get something going for him this summer,
Okay.
which would be a big rollout presentation with the Conservation Commission bookending that.
So do you want me to delay discussing the water thing? I mean, the only thing I'm basically saying there is that, the main recommendation that we made in the plan was to update the last study that
Why
we had.
why don't you hold back until we have that first
Yeah.
meeting?
Okay, so
I haven't heard back from.
I'll delete this discussion of water
Charlie should have something to say about another study.
and maybe put something else in there.
I'm glad you're doing that, because I think, 80% of our plan would pass easily. We're at the hard part, and when we go to these meetings, we're talking about the hard part, and we haven't come to agreement on them, and, we're looking kind of iffy there. Although I understand why we are.
Yeah.
I think we get people like occurred in the, this month's anchor, a guy I think really just needs, likes to listen to himself talk, but that's the kind of reaction, we get. but
Yeah, that's
That's
why I
where we're
wanna,
at.
we wanna wait, put the hard parts sort of at the end of this process so that we have a chance to make sure we're on solid footing and we all agree, if you will.
You know, I think if we come up with this rural definition, and then we talk about how, I think most people would really like this in town. And then if we talk to that, about how the plan is gonna reinforce this, and keep this as much as possible, realizing that things change, it's part of life, I think people would go for it.
Okay, that's good. All right,
Can I,
sir.
Amy, when you do this, I hope you keep in mind that we've already, David helped us develop a vision statement and so
Right.
on. And this is bordering close to a vision statement, it seems to me. And think about how these two relate to each other. Do we fold it into one document? Do we keep them separate? But I think we should be cognizant of the fact that we already have a vision statement, and this is a kind of another vision statement. And so we need to know how we merge them or how we deal with this bipolar situation.
When I send this out, yeah, that's a good thing for everybody to think about.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And so I'm not gonna do that on my own, but I think you're absolutely right, that we should all pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good discussion. All right. I'd like at this point to turn to Amy and ask her to kind of summarize some of the ordinance changes that are coming before the town for a vote at the end of the week, I guess Saturday.
I can do that. I had a whole thing written out, and of course I left it on my front stoop. But I think I can do it quickly, which is probably a good thing for all of us. The first thing is that the definition of accessory
Dwelling unit.
Dwelling unit,
Dwelling unit.
accessory dwelling unit.
is, that definition is gonna be the state definition, so it's an accessory, that's just a definition change. The second thing is that accessory dwelling units are going to be allowed, not in the shoreland zone, as long as the accessory dwelling unit can be attached within or a separate dwelling unit on a single-family property. It has to meet setback requirements, and it has to prove that the septic system has the capacity to handle the unit. I don't remember if they're allowed in subdivisions or not. In some cases, I think they are, and in some cases, I think they're not.
Yeah, they are.
They
Yeah,
are.
I would
So
think they would be,
An
yeah.
approved subdivision.
Yeah. I happen to have one.
Okay, so the other thing is that the unit has to be in existence from the date of adoption of the ordinance. So what that will do then is it will not say, hey, everybody, you can just build a single-family house with an accessory dwelling unit on it. The accessory dwelling unit, and that may be something that we should revisit, but the accessory dwelling unit at this point has to be, the house has to be
Existing.
built
Existing.
as of
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Who does it? I didn't realize that.
And
That's interesting.
owner occupied of the main unit.
And owner occupied
Yeah.
of the main
So
unit, thank you.
You can't, yeah, you can't build a two-unit
Yeah.
property.
But I thought the owner could live in the accessory
Oh,
accessory
yeah,
dwelling
they
unit.
And live
Oh,
in
yeah.
it, yes,
As long as you're
absolutely.
living on the property.
Yeah.
Live in it and rent the house.
Yeah.
So that's an existing single-family house, you can have an accessory dwelling unit to it. If you, the other thing is, if you have up to a 3-bedroom house, or as Al said, a 4-bedroom house, you can carve out units in that structure and then sell them separately, as separate units. So a 3-bedroom dwelling unit that was single-family, could be carved into a 1-bedroom unit, and then another dwelling unit that has 2 bedrooms. There are restrictions on that in terms of setback, also protections for subsurface wastewater, lot coverage, and things like that. So it's not going to, pave the entire lot. So those, I think, are, as the Affordable Housing Committee said, they're small incremental changes that I think are going to be roundly supported by the town. There are a couple of other changes that I think are really good. One is the change from the Code Enforcement Office. Al mentioned that the planning board, as it works now, is essentially given a subdivision plan or given a plan for review. It goes through the town planner, and if it meets the standards of the ordinance, it has to be approved. There's no staff time, no expertise, and no allowability really for the planning board to say, we'd like staff to make this a greener project. Could you work with staff and make this a greener project? The reason for that is that has to happen up front, and you need to have staff time to do it. We don't have the capacity or the possibility to do this now. So we get a subdivision like, any of the subdivisions we've gotten, and they're basically fait accomplis. We can't change them. We can't say, please cluster this. The developer would probably say, no. And we would have to say, okay, well, we asked. So that's something that we need to think about. But one of the other amendments is shall an ordinance regarding inspection assistance for the code enforcement office be enacted. This is what I think is a not temporary, it's a good step toward what I was just talking about. The code office will now be able to get assistance, financial assistance from the applicant to do the inspections. And that really has to happen, because right now, the planning board may approve a development and may or may not get financial assistance to help the codes office make sure that they have complied with the conditions that the planning board has set on it. Or the codes office may be reviewing a single-family house or a retail establishment or something else, or a road or some piece of infrastructure. And the codes office does not have the staff or the expertise to do some of the professional engineering that needs to be done on that. And this will allow the codes office to say to the applicant, we need to put aside, I think it's 1% of the total project cost into a fund, and we will draw from that fund to use professional expertise for review of your project as it's being built, and then anything that's left over goes back to the applicant. So that will help the town to manage what's already being allowed. It will help the town to approve projects that don't have problems down the road because the road washed out because the developer cut a corner or something like that. I'll give you a great example. In Brunswick, we approved a McDonald's on Pleasant Street. McDonald's had the foundation laid when our, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Our peer reviewer went out and said, this thing is below grade. It's below the approved grade. They're 2% below or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. I would never have picked up on that. So they had to redo their foundation because it wasn't built according to plan. And we could do that because we had the money from the developer to allow us to hire the expertise. The town doesn't want to have a professional engineer on staff 24/7, but we can hire a professional engineer and develop a relationship with a firm that can do that work on an ad hoc basis, and that's what this will allow. The other one is the flood plant management ordinance, and I'm going to ask Kevin to deal with this, because the planning board handed it off to the select board.
Well, it actually got tweaked by Sue Baker and the other woman from FEMA. At first, it was pretty miserable. For a residential wharf, you're going to need an engineer stamp. You've needed one for a commercial wharf since 2001, last 24 years. But the new provisions, all you need is a reliable wharf builder with credentials, and you don't need the engineer stamp on a commercial wharf. Unfortunately, for somebody down at Kenny's Harbor, they'd already hired an engineer. But after the vote, and on the 20th becomes in effect, to build a commercial wharf now, all you need is, ever who your wharf builder is, come in here and sign for it.
Did you address the 400 square feet limit?
Yeah, they wouldn't
It's
touch it.
200.
That's gonna
Is it
take more.
200?
I think so.
You can't even get a variance.
No.
We gotta change the whole language, the variance language and everything, because it's ridiculous. You know, you can't build a bait shed.
That needs to go back and be reviewed because some person in some urban office somewhere that doesn't
yeah.
know jack about commercial fishing in a rural town decides to limit the size of a commercial fishing shack or a,
Yeah.
equipment storage
Yeah.
to
10 by
something
20,
that's
yeah.
essentially unusable.
Yeah, so.
And so-
It's being worked on from a different angle.
Political,
Not yet, but it will be.
that's how you're going to do it.
Yep,
Yep, that's how you're going to do it.
yep.
So there's that, and then also if you have a seawall or something gets washed out in a storm and it's a containment, then you do need a civil or
You do, but if just replace what were there without expanding it, you can just, everybody's doing it anyway
Yeah.
right now, just to say what they got, but, yeah.
Okay.
So, it's actually, the ordinance is a pretty good deal, considering where we started.
Okay.
Uh,
This is going to be, this is going to, you know, and it gets to Dave's comment about climate change. Like, we were at this on, behind Chip Black's old place.
Yep.
With this little shack that the storm completely
yeah.
washed out their holding tanks, totally washed them out. And so they're putting in a tiny little septic system, but they lost their well.
Yeah.
So they're having to get their water from the condo unit. And,
And last year, actually, the condo owner offered to let them tie into their septic system, and they wouldn't do it. Wow. For whatever reason, they said, now we're all right, because, you know, there was a motel there, so now you don't have the need for such a large containment system. He said, well, just tap into this. Whatever reason they didn't.
oh, that's amazing.
They're putting their own in.
What's that?
They're putting their own in now.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
A
that's.
tiny little thing.
It's
you know.
tiny and it's right on the shore. Anyway, these are all things.
Okay, so Saturday, special town meeting,
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, good stuff.
Hopefully be out by 10 after.
Yeah.
Famous last words.
All right.
John Lloyd's not moderating. We actually have one
Those
of
are
the town
ones that
attorneys
go for
doing it.
3
so-
hours.
No.
Okay, so I think we had a good discussion tonight, and Amy will work on the definition for rural character. I'll try to get this draft article out to you guys and gals tomorrow, and then we'll press on from that standpoint. Next meeting is the 25th. I'll be driving back from Virginia. I should be here on the 25th, but if I'm not, I'm going to ring our intrepid. Are
Okay.
you going to be here on the 25th?
I should be here and you and I should talk about the
Okay.
agenda, but
Okay, will do.
we'll do that.
All right. And any other comments or questions, announcements
Nope.
at this point?
No.
I declare this meeting adjourned.